Hey guys, sorry for that confusion. Everyone, welcome to our office hours. It's January 13th, 2021. My name is Eric Osterman, and I'll be leading the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator. What that means is that we help companies own their infrastructure in record time by building it together with your team and then showing them the ropes. If that sounds interesting, head over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started. For those of you new to the call, the format is very informal. My goal is to get your questions answered. So feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to jump in and participate. If you're tuning in from our podcast or YouTube channel, you can always register for these live and interactive sessions by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We host these calls every week. We'll automatically post a video recording of this session to our YouTube channel, as well as follow up with an email so that you can share it with your team. So with that said, let's kick it off. Got a couple just announcements that I saw in the news this past week I want to bring up. One is a tool that has been frequently recommended, at least to me, as somebody who suffers from tab overload, and that is the Great Suspender. So the Great Suspender is this thing that, like, if you're one of these people like me that ends up at the end of the day, I have about 100 tabs open. What the Great Suspender does is it automatically will blank page those tabs so they don't take up CPU and resources. And then there's like a link to reload that page. Well, turns out that this plugin has changed ownership recently and also required elevated scope permissions and can basically view all pages, all history, everything. So it doesn't really make me feel warm and fuzzy. I think it's a security risk and should be reevaluated. Anybody anybody have any more insight on this issue with the Great Suspender? All right. The other interesting thing, I was talking to my advisor about this, and we talked about having a new concept of tab zero. So you've heard of inbox zero. So your email inbox, you every email is actionable in some way. Either it's garbage, you don't care about it, archive it or delete it. There's an action you need to do, so you create that in your to-do list. Or you schedule it to come back later, for example. Well, what about for tabs? It's like that would be a good practice at the end of the day, right? To go through each of your tabs, decide, is there an action that I need to do with this tab, or do I just delete it? And oftentimes I use the tabs as my extension of my memory of the things that I was working on, and just get overloaded and it doesn't work. Anybody have a great solution better solution for how I can manage working with so many tabs?
I know there's one extension that I use called OneTab. I think it's kind of
One
old, but
tab?
yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it just pretty much takes all them and stores it on some page. It stores it somewhere, but it pretty much closes them all, and then it has them filtered by date, and you could go like, oh, on this day I was looking at these tabs.
One tab. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
I'll I'll take a look
I've
at one.
been I've been using that as well, but once in a while it ditches the whatever it stored basically. Yeah, this is the one. It's very popular. But once in a while I found that I lost all my saved tab data. So just to keep in mind.
Okay.
For me, I have a lot of tabs and I don't really like having a lot of tabs being opened. What I do is I use Notion for
Mm.
monitoring my reading list so that whenever I just lose track of my tabs, I just have them saved somewhere safe.
Do you have some automated process to get them into Notion, or are you just copying the tab link into Notion like checklist?
Yeah, there's this excellent extension by Notion. It's called Web Clipper, I think. It's very similar to the one that Evernote has, but it's better. What it does, in Gitbucket, they have this thing to save links into the pocket. They have the same feature, but instead of there, you would be saving it in the Notion database, and then you can just customize it in the way that
I
it would
got you.
be for you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've used Evernote Web Clipper in the past, but that's a good suggestion alternative. Like, so just clip each page, so you have the actual whole page stored, and then you can go back to it at some point, as
Yep.
well.
And yeah. And even the URL too.
What was that? Auto? Or
And even the URL too can be
even the
saved.
URL too? Yeah, yeah. It saves
Yeah.
that. That's cool. Any other good suggestions on how to get to fewer tabs? All right. So the other announcement I was pretty excited about. Muhammad brought it to our attention, and I appreciate that. Is that for the longest time, Terraform didn't support any of the AWS SSO resources. I think it was hung up on there was no automated tests, so they didn't want to merge the updates to the provider until that was there. So it looks like there's better coverage now for the AWS SSO resources. So yeah, you don't need to use the hacks with like CloudFormation templates anymore. Has anyone already, Mohammed, have you already started kicking the tires for this?
Hey, I have a question around that.
Yeah, sure.
So I looked into it a little bit, and I'm still coming up to speed on getting deeper into Terraform. But as I looked into it, it's not like a Terraform module that you can use. It looks like it's a plugin, and I'm still trying to figure out like the the difference in going from modules to plugins with Terraform. Can you explain a little bit about it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me elaborate on this. So basically, modules are an encapsulation of perhaps best practices or an opinionated way to use the underlying resources. And the way that Terraform is structured is basically there's a provider for everything. So if we go to HashiCorp, let's see here. Actually, where HashiCorp Terraform providers. I forget where the best list is here. So yeah, here's a registry of all the different providers. A provider is kind of like what you're calling is the plugin, and anyone can write a plugin, but those are in Go, and those are real code and tested and distributed. So providers provide the business logic at the underlying level of how to interact with the primitives of the cloud API. Like how do you create an EC2 instance? How do you create an auto scale group? Stuff like that. It doesn't concern itself with how do you create an auto scale group with EC2 instances and CloudWatch monitoring. That is a pattern, and that's what's implemented with like a Terraform module. So what we see with this announcement here is basically, I guess it was in my Slack window, is that the provider, which is the underlying Terraform plugin, has added support for the underlying AWS primitives needed to control those things. And that's what Cloud Posse needs. So then we can go and create a module that implements AWS SSO in a more user-friendly way.
Gotcha.
So like
Yeah.
we look at the EKS cluster and we look at main, and this is relying on dozens of AWS resources like this. We would have a module similar to that for SSO.
Okay. So
welcome, Bill.
in order to do that, you either have to take advantage of Go language, or you'd have to create the module on top of that.
Yeah, exactly. And by and large, it's one of these things where like I would say probably 95% of Terraform users never go to the level of creating providers, modifying providers, or things like that. That is very advanced Terraform. Generally, providers in Terraform are managed by the vendors, with the exception of a few core providers. HashiCorp manages all the providers for AWS, but let's say you depend on Sumo Logic or Splunk or Datadog. Those providers are not managed by HashiCorp. Those are managed by the vendors themselves. Any other questions related to that or observations? Oh, Andy, looks like you're selecting everything on the slide. All right. Let's see.
I would like to know if anyone is using those AWS SSO resources. It took a while for them to come out, and I think you mentioned, Eric, that it was because of there was no tests for them, but I think there was no API support on AWS side to create those programmatically. And that released in the end of 2020. And I'm wondering if anybody's actually using these yet, because I think, this is a great future thing, like something I want to provide to, projects I'm working on, because it's a lot better than managing this stuff through SAML or other means. But it seems early, so I'm kind of hesitant as well.
Yeah, thanks for that correction. I think you might be right that it was that the underlying AWS APIs weren't available. Maybe I was confusing the lack of tests with another issue I was looking at. Somebody was about to add something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask Matt kind of what his hesitation for using AWS SSO was. Because like we implemented AWS SSO in our organization, but did not leverage, the Terraform management of it yet. Because this only came out, I think, like 6 days ago.
Yeah, I've implemented it in personal projects, like, my own AWS organization that's run for my business. I have it there, but I haven't implemented it for client projects because I, don't want to add the management overhead of, doing ClickOps for that for my clients. So like, I would rather manage things through, regular old IAM than, have to do a ticket workflow for managing users. So that was a thought process on my end.
Yeah, it was a bit similar for us. So we punted on implementing any AWS SSO stuff until a couple months ago, and then we did go the route with 2 customers now, and we implemented AWS SSO, not using this because this was just released. So we did use ClickOps, and this would be like one of like 2 or 3 things that we do in an engagement that would be ClickOps, and it's just orthogonal to what we're based on. The idea is that we can't iterate on something that is ClickOps and improve that process very well unless it gets into infrastructure as code. So we've avoided it. I would expect us by the end of Q2 probably to have a Terraform module probably for AWS SSO.
I can talk about that, guys. So I tested actually the Terraform implementation of SSO. I am disappointed actually with the current implementation. I was waiting for that, as all of you. The problem was with the Go library, actually with the API, the SDK of the Go for AWS. It wasn't support the API yet for SSO. So the pull request on the GitHub, it contains 4 resources. The first one is the assignment, is the permission set, inline permission set, manage permission set, and then the assignment. I was surprised that the pull request got merged without the assignment. So this is not fully functional actually. You only can create permission set and attach policy to these permission sets without assigning to accounts or a group. So yeah, so that's the case. I'm not sure why they merged the 3 resources and they skipped the assignment, which is the important one. So I test that actually on organization. But for now, you can fall back to CloudFormation if you want. There is a template I can send you if you want. So you can import CloudFormation within Terraform if you like. But this is not yet ready, I think.
Probably not ready to invest fully in a fully baked solution. But yeah, can you reply to that thread or post in Office Hours channel the link to the CloudFormation template stuff that you use? That'd be cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Thanks. Before we move on, any other thing to talk about there under the AWS SSO support? All right. The other thing you'll see if you're in our Slack team, we have RSS feed for Terraform releases of important stuff. So the other thing that dropped was one of the first alphas of Terraform 0.15. If you're familiar with Terraform 0.14, that also shipped much earlier. HashiCorp as a company is really trying to speed up the releases and get to a 1.0. I think there's been some rumors going around that 0.15 might be one of the last 0. Releases before 1.0 of Terraform drops. Most of the other HashiCorp products have hit 1.0, so it would be exciting to see Terraform get there. What that means is that the stability of the HCL language and everything will be increased, improved. There's been a lot of refactoring going on in Terraform land to support some of the features users were requesting. Couple notable announcements there is that we see that the list and map functions, which have been around since like pre 0.11, 0.9 era of HCL, are going to get dropped finally. And you can just use brackets and braces in HCL too to represent those. Any other interesting observations related to 0.15?
I think there is optional attribute. Did anyone test that in Terraform?
Optional attributes. What is that?
So I think it's on 14, 0.14. So you can, when you specify a variable, you specify, let's say a map of string, you can specify that one of these map elements is optional.
Oh,
so
yes.
Yeah.
That'll be really nice. That's really annoying. Like especially if you're using a lot of dynamic blocks with maps, and you have to specify every single parameter without defaults.
Yeah, I tested actually with your ALB module.
Yeah.
So there is the load balancer variable. So sometimes you can specify a bunch of them as optional. You don't need to specify the whole map. Actually, it's pretty nice. I will post it also on the channel. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Mohammed. All right, let's. The other announcement is okay. Yeah, Cloud Posse is still hiring. We're looking to bring on more US-based subcontractors, senior level. So Andy, I think, has already shared the link maybe to that in the Office Hours channel. If you're interested, please reach out. Yeah, do check out our YouTube channel for all the past recordings of Office Hours. We'll share a link for that as well. There's tons. Everyone from last year, all 52 videos are posted. All right, so topics for today. Here are a few that I got by combing through recent conversations in Office Hours and the Terraform channel that I think are worth bringing up. Let's get through these and then see if there are any other questions out there that we can help answer. So one of these is not really a question so much as a statement, and it struck a chord with me, struck a chord with Andrew Roth as well. Jim brought it up last week, and that is there is no such thing as a best practice anymore. So let's go with that. Let me set it up and then turn it over for some conversation here. I think what struck this is that the technology that we work with today with DevOps and the tools are so cutting edge and so rough that to claim that there's a best practice for how to do all of this stuff is insincere. I think what we can do is a good point. What Andrew said here is that there are best practices overall for our industry. Use source control. Yes, that is a good best practice. I don't think we can challenge that best practice. But is the best practice you have to use GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab or some other system? I think that's a hard claim to make. Once we say we want to use GitHub, then there's some recommendations, some idiomatic best practices. Some idiomatic recommendations of how to use GitHub. There's Git workflow, there's GitHub workflow, for example. There are branch protections, and how you use those, it will be up to you. Other things is like, use CICD, practice GitOps, or other things. The problem is that once you get into any one of these, there is just so many options, so many decisions how to do it. There's just ways we've done it. that have worked for us, but I think that's where we're overloading the use of best practices. Anybody else have something to add to that? Actually, first I'd like to, Andrew, if you're on the call, do you want to add anything to that? Or Jim, since you brought it up? All right, anybody else?
Yeah, I
Go
want
ahead,
to add
Mark.
something. Yeah, I recommend a book to read, which is Infrastructure as a Code. So that's a nice book that actually discusses the use of best practices. It says that there is no best practices actually. There is patterns, practices, and experience that you learn. There is no. I see someone laughing. So there is no best practice actually. There is no optimal way to do something. So do whatever work with you. That's, I think, the answer.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. And if you can post a link in office hours to the book that you're talking about, in case somebody else wants to see that. Running along with that theme, and as it relates to Cloud Posse, I think what I set out to do with Cloud Posse when we founded it was try and reduce the number of practices out there to consolidate on a couple ways of doing it and then collaborate on that across organizations. So that's what we have in Cloud Posse with our module ecosystem and ways, good ways of doing EKS that works for us that other people can use and consolidate on, but it's by no means the only way. All right, let's see. The next topic was, yeah, this is a good one. How to use Terraform with Teams. This was posted in the Terraform channel, and it partially relates to one of our office hours at the end of last year on tacos, and we should probably reply to that thread with that. With a link to that video. But let me read Ophir's question verbatim here. So, hi, quick question. How do you work as a team over Terraform and other infrastructure as code? We're working on a single dev stack, but sometimes two developers are adding a feature to the stack in the same week, having two different branches on GitHub, and which we obviously want, but at the same time, we can't really let them work simultaneously without taking over the other developers' changes. One option would be to have two stacks, but we are trying to find a different solution due to internal reasons. So let me go through this more specifically on the Terraform side than the CloudFormation side or other tools. But this is a very real problem when you're working with Terraform, for example. So let me bring up an example. All right, you guys have a Terraform project. This Terraform project is building up a workspace that has an S3 bucket and maybe an RDS database. So one developer wants to resize this database because in the dev environment, it no longer pulls its weight. You're running more queries, the data size, the data set has increased. So he opens a pull request to increase the size of the database. At the same time, it was realized that the S3 bucket that was provisioned as part of this module had two open permissions. So another pull request is open for that. And you want to test this, and it's in the dev environment, and both these pull requests are open at the same time. Terraform does locking, but that's different. Terraform locking is like, at the same time, we are trying to modify the same state file. It will prevent that. But it's not talking about the infrastructure as code piece. We are on the Git side, on the GitOps side, are trying to modify the same workspace in two different pull requests. And this is one of the nice things that was solved with Atlantis. So if your team is looking to practice GitOps with Terraform, there's a lot of options out there. Atlantis is kind of like the original option for Terraform. There's a nice site, runatlantis.io, and they have some screenshots here. Let's see here. So these screenshots don't actually show what it does, but basically what happens in Atlantis is when that pull request is opened, that project folder on GitHub is locked until that pull request is merged. So if anybody else tries to modify source code in that project folder, it won't let them apply that until the other pull requests are merged or the locks are freed on Atlantis. I presume many of the other options for Terraform as for a continuous delivery of Terraform. So we're talking Spacelift, we're talking Scalar, we're talking Terraform Cloud, we're talking M0. They probably have some solutions for this, but I don't know specifically if they solve that problem. This is a perfect segue, though, into a similar question that I'd like to talk about at length, maybe a little bit after this, which would be anybody using GitHub Actions with Terraform, and how are you doing it? And just a spoiler alert here, I would strongly advise against doing it in place of using one of the continuous delivery platforms for Terraform for reasons like this. Doing locking in GitHub Actions for this is non-trivial thing. Yeah, you can implement anything, but suddenly your GitHub action is looking a lot different from this very simple thing that just runs Terraform apply in a plan in one step and Terraform apply in another step to a testing monstrosity that looks like what we do in our actions here for testing Terraform. So,
hey Eric.
Yeah.
Just to add, there is this is Pepe.
Pepe is by the way, just a background here. Pepe, he is one of the maintainers of Atlantis. So let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, there has been a lot of development lately in Atlantis, and one of the new PRs that I think is going to get merged. There is a few more reviews to be done on it. Is actually the ability to disable any locking in Atlantis. So. And there is many reasons why you will want to do that, and one of the reasons could be that you might actually have some automated way to run apply in your PRs after they are reviewed, so you can actually just don't have any locking and have many PRs against the same repo. So it is it's being reviewed at this point.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't.
Yeah, and they added and another thing is going to be added too is OPA. Policy context running in Atlantis natively, so you could actually then eventually maybe tie the locking with the policy too. So
that would be probably the longer term, the better solution in the long run would be an OPA policy that says, that does something about that. That's the challenge, though, coming up with that library of Rego policies that you're going to want for that.
Yeah, it is. Lyft is doing that work.
Oh, Lyft is doing that?
Yeah, one of the new maintainers comes from Lyft. Actually, Lyft has a team of people working for Atlantis full time.
Really?
For the internal Atlantis version. Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
So they're releasing features back to the Atlantis since they added one of the developers in it.
Oh, very cool. So they're upstreaming that. That's good news.
Yeah, and they don't use any groups, which is very interesting.
And they don't use the What is actually on that topic? What's the status of the GitHub team?
Pepe has been very lazy, and he hasn't write the test yet, and that's why.
Bad Pepe.
Yes. So you can ping Pepe and ask him, but it has been approved, but it requires I need to create 4 or 5 tests, because it doesn't have any tests, and after that it will be merged.
I saw that the thumbs up has grown to 51 or 52.
I know, it's crazy.
And so that's cool. I'm glad that this came to light again. So thanks.
After many years.
After many years. Yeah. So actually, I have another question related to Atlantis, Pepe, since you're the most current on everything going on there. With the Rego work, and this is with the Open Policy Agent stuff, is the Open Policy Agent stuff going to allow actions so that you can set up a relationship where, like, when this project is applied, this project will reapply?
I don't think I did. I think that they in the call they mentioned that they were doing something like that, but I don't think this PR has those changes in. I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
That's one of the really
I don't
nice
believe
things in
so.
Spacelift is you can set up an OPA Rego policy that will uh, trigger when a dependent project is, for example, applied. If
Correct.
you have
Yeah.
another project that, why this is so important is like, and this also relates to working with Terraform in teams, is if you're using remote state in your projects, that remote state is not in source control, but that remote state can change without reapplying this project. So how do you set up that relationship? So when this project is updated, like when this folder of Terraform code changes, this folder of Terraform code automatically reapplies. Basically, standard problems working with continuous delivery in a mono repo, which most Terraform organizations are.
That PR that you have the mouse, the one on top is the one I'm talking about.
Implement new policy
Yeah.
check workflow. Okay.
Yeah, that's the one.
To that point, Eric, about remote state being kind of tracked outside of version control, it still sucks because you still have to. There's still probably changes to that dependent project on the upstream project, so it's going to run a plan against that dependent project even before the remote state changes, and that's likely if it's a new output from your upstream project, then it's going to fail because that new output isn't in the remote state yet. That's going to fail. But then the second time, once that upstream project actually applies and that remote state is populated with the new output, then it'll apply correctly. But it's like the relationship there, the dependency graph there is kind of ugly, and there's no way to like easily call that out.
So, and I know you're working with this and submitted some PRs for our Terraform Cloud module that manages some of this stuff. Matt, I'm curious if you worked at all using the triggers here, which is how we did that for Terraform Cloud.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, is that it solves the problem, right? Because if your project that uses remote state, we're calling that the dependent project, if that has changes that require that remote state, it's still going to plan when those changes get merged, and plan and try and apply when those changes get merged. But the remote, it'll fail because that remote state isn't there yet. It needs to wait actually on that upstream project for that upstream workspace to complete. So it solves the problem, but it's also painful because it's like you add another plan and failure into the pipeline, and Terraform Cloud never looks like there's not an error. It looks like there's errors all the time because there's you can introduce things that are just normal day-to-day changes, and yet they add something that we don't have a way of describing, at least to Terraform Cloud, of hey, wait until this remote state populates before you plan.
That is a edge case that is not uncommon and unfortunate. So in this case here, like we have first project and second project. What if second project depends on the remote state of first project? Well, then we can add triggers here in second project that says basically second project should trigger when first project is updated. However, if we're modifying first project and second project in the same pull request, there is a race condition there, and second project will probably fail the first time until first project runs. Then first project runs, and then second project will be applied based on the trigger. So yeah, this stuff is hard to solve, and what it really requires is a less optimal approach, which is changing your development approach to try and not change multiple projects in one PR. Like adding outputs to the first project, that should be one feature release, and then the next one is consuming those outputs in another project.
Yeah, requiring the team to work on the workflow part instead of having the system be aware of it, which, I mean, I think that's acceptable. This isn't like a huge deal. It ends up getting to the end result. It's just something that, you were mentioning remote state and within the like idea of Terraform CD, and it's a pain. There's a lot going on.
And it's this thing like to bundle or unbundle your modules, right? All this is solved if you just put everything in your root module, then Terraform does it for you. And then the blast radius is suddenly, though, your entire infrastructure. So then we re-implement it with less powerful tools, lesser gods, and run into problems when they don't work. All right, so let's transition right into GitHub Actions with Terraform and how to do that. That was another question posted in the Terraform channel in the last day or so here. So I don't know if I pinned it or not. Yes. I'll just click on my link here. It's slower for me. All right. Does anyone here use GitHub Actions in combination with Terraform? I'm particularly struggling with modeling the approval process in GitHub Actions. And yeah, that's the real kicker. So you are not alone in struggling with that. And that's like the biggest reason why it's hard to do. But the other considerations are like, let's take Atlantis, for example, which is a good reference example of how to implement GitOps for Terraform. And that is like the best practice is, right, you have one step that generates a Terraform plan, and that plan is actually a artifact. It's a JSON data structure with the changes that are going to happen. You want to stash that somewhere, and keep in mind that plan may or may not have sensitive data in it, secrets. So where you stick that plan, well, you're not going to attach it as an artifact to this build, which would be like the normal way you treat artifacts in a CI process on GitHub Actions. You're going to have to stash it instead someplace like S3. That means that we're talking also in our GitHub action to AWS. We're probably not going to want to hard code our AWS credentials as secrets in GitHub Actions because those secrets are like give God mode to anybody who has control over that infrastructure. So that means the scope has now increased. So now we're going to be deploying GitHub runners on-prem in some VPC. Okay, so we're deploying our GitHub runners on-prem now. Awesome, that simplifies this whole class of problems. We're just going to give these runners a service account so they can talk to AWS. All right, cool. How are we going to deploy those GitHub runners? Okay, there's a couple Kubernetes controllers out there. Summerwind is the one project that has a controller. Mumoshu is working on that one. So you deploy that. Okay, well, wait, are we deploying that on Kubernetes? Okay, so we're going to have now a Kubernetes cluster that has this pod that has God mode that you can exec into and do whatever you want with. Okay, well, okay, I guess we'll be fine with that. But maybe what we want to do is have a separate Kubernetes cluster that's more locked down than other Kubernetes clusters. Where do we deploy that? Okay, so we're going to have an automation account. How does that cluster now talk to our other clusters in the other accounts? So now we have a networking problem. We could deploy one big VPC across all the accounts, or we could set up a transit gateway, and now we have to set up the routes to allow that automation cluster to talk to the other clusters. My point is, this stuff it gets messy very, very, very quickly. And I don't know how much you're actually saving in terms of effort and cost, especially in terms of engineering resources to implement the solution your own way. At best, from an open source perspective, I'd recommend using Atlantis and checking that out, especially now that there's new life coming into Atlantis. There are maintainers, they are merging pull requests. I think we're going to see a lot of improvements here in Q1. But shy of doing that, we're talking, we'll reshare a video here from end of December where we talk to the vendors. We call this tacos. Terraform automation and collaboration software. And there are 4 or 5 vendors now trying to solve this problem and make it better for you. So long and short of it, I think just cut bait on using GitHub Actions with it. There is one other cool thing I just wanted to say, like regarding approval steps. 2 things. Actually, I should have added these to announcements. They were brought to my attention recently. One is, like if I go to our Cloud Posse example app, if you have an open source organization or you have an enterprise agreement with GitHub, you can now do environments, and environments have the concept of required approvers to do deployments. I haven't seen anybody try and do this for Terraform, probably because most companies don't make their Terraform code public, especially the stuff that deploys their production infrastructure. And the other ones, yeah, they're going to be enterprises and they're slow to move, so they probably haven't yet looked into how to use environments here. The other cool thing that was brought to my attention, and like we're talking a week ago, so I can't say, here's our best practice. No, because, well, we just talked about best practices and how those don't really exist for this. But Delivery Bot was a pretty cool product out there. It was a SaaS solution. They recently converted to open source. It's public. You can see it on GitHub. Delivery Bot is a small little daemon you deploy in your environment on Kubernetes or as a standalone. And its sole process is just to manage approvals using the built-in capability of So GitHub as a platform, as an API, has the concept of deployments. It's just not exposed through the UI. So what Delivery Bot does is it taps into that and gives you a way of promoting releases, introducing approvers, requiring successful deployments to specific environments using status checks and enforcing status checks pass before allowing deployment to another environment. The other key thing to keep in mind with GitHub is that status checks, while the way most of us as developers interact with GitHub is via pull requests, and we see our status checks on a pull request, status checks actually exist entirely outside of pull requests. They're associated with commits. So you can use status checks as a way to gate what happens to a commit. And the status API is controlled with different access controls in the GitHub access control model. So it works as a pretty convenient. So status checks are a pretty convenient way to control access, so long as you control who has the ability to create status checks. Anybody using Delivery Bot or anybody check it out before? It also supports chat ops, by the way, so you can comment on pull
actually,
requests.
it's funny. I saw it today on your module, so I thought what it is. So you just explained actually. So
okay. Yeah. This is going to be one of the things that we are looking into right now for basically for customers that use GitHub Actions. We need to introduce approval workflows, and I think Delivery Bot will be one of the ways we do it for general approval flows with GitHub Actions. All right.
You mentioned that Delivery Bot uses the GitHub deployments API. Is that what you said?
At least so. Okay, so maybe I'm using the wrong. Maybe it's using the environments API. The way it was related to me by a developer on the team was deployments API. GitHub environments is a concept of the API. GitHub status checks are a concept of the API. I don't know if there's specifically a deployment API, and I might have misspoken there. That might be the environments API.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up is because maybe a month ago I heard about this GitHub deployments API.
Oh, maybe.
And it's super undocumented.
This thing is undocumented. Whatever Delivery Bot uses is undocumented.
And all I found was a reference to it that's just a paragraph. Like, I think if you go to that first link in your search, your Google search over there, it just links to a paragraph within another page. I think that might be it. Yeah, so if you like, it's just a paragraph on this page.
Hmm.
And I haven't had much success like looking around for it.
Well, here,
but
list deployment. No, so there is officially a deployments API, it looks like. And here it is breaking down at least some of the endpoints.
yeah.
So maybe
Some-
they've updated it.
Yeah, and I was just curious if anybody on this call could break it down for me, because my understanding is that you could actually have it, like, let's say you have deployments in ECS. Can you merge a pull request and then that pull request just listens for success or failure from your ECS cluster?
No, my guess is that it's totally my guess is the API is more like a data store almost of like the status of commits. You have other like it won't know anything about ECS, EKS,
Yeah.
Heroku, whatever. You have other bots that do that. And like this, I forget which framework, but a delivery bot is built on one of the popular chat ops frameworks, whatever that is.
Hugh?
Yeah, I don't remember. So at a very least, delivery bot would be a gateway into how to interact with that API, whether it be documented or not. So that's about as much as I can shed on this. I'm definitely out on a limb here in terms of experience. I only discovered about a week ago, and I only saw one demo. Cool. I'll post this into office hours here as well. All right. The last question that came up in sweetops that I wanted to talk about, elaborate on the answers basically is how to pick your node pools for EKS and how to provision them. So Gene is asking kind of, I need some insights on using Terraform for AWS EKS, which is better for creating worker nodes, CloudFormation stacks, or node groups. And I think there's some, I think we're misusing some terms here or confusing some terms. And of course, you can create a node pool using CloudFormation and call that CloudFormation from Terraform, or you can just use CloudFormation and skip Terraform entirely. We've had other conversations in office hours like which do I use, Terraform or CloudFormation. This tends to be a kind of a language holy war, like tabs versus spaces. That this is a decision for your team to decide which they like, which resonates with your philosophy on engineering more and your experience. A lot of people jump ship for CloudFormation to Terraform because things they want to do come out much later in CloudFormation, or CloudFormation stacks just deploy too slowly, or they just hate looking at JSON, or they didn't like CDK, or a lot of reasons. And then people jump ship from Terraform to CloudFormation because they really love the experience of how easy it is to deploy a CloudFormation stack once you have the YAML or JSON for that. All right, so node groups for Kubernetes. And there is no one answer for that. There is what you're trying to solve. So let's talk about what our approach has been. So in Kubernetes, I think it's important, in AWS and for Kubernetes, I think it's important to separate the concepts of the cluster from the node pools. And you can have any number of node pools with different kinds of configurations and instantiated in different ways. And this is really the beautiful thing about Kubernetes and about how they implemented node pools with EKS. So when we released our support for node pools, we kept them as separate modules because the intent was to mix and match them depending on requirements. Our first implementation was the AWS EKS Workers module, which builds on our auto scaling group module and brings up like a traditional AWS EC2 auto scale group with your nodes connecting to the EKS cluster. What's nice about this solution is you have absolutely full control over the auto scale group and the EC2 nodes and the AMIs and how that works. But it's a little bit more management in the long run for ensuring that everything is operational, as opposed to managed node groups by AWS, where they manage sick nodes and recovery of that. They facilitate upgrades of your node pools and are working on additional features, like probably making it, I'm hoping AWS is making it easier to do like CNI upgrades and stuff like that, so you don't have to do that as part of your post process of upgrading a cluster. Then you have like, what if you want a fully serverless node pool for some class of applications? Well, then you can deploy a Fargate node pool for those applications. But Fargate node pools have a lot of limitations. I remember in our initial pull request here, when we implemented it, we highlighted what those implementations are somewhere. Yeah, so, you know, they're like, originally you couldn't use classic load balancers and network load balancers. I think that might have changed now. You couldn't mount persistent volumes. The GPUs weren't available. You know, vertical. There's strict limits on the size of your pods that you could choose, because under the hood it's using Fargate. So you know, your mileage may vary with using that. And then the last thing I really want to emphasize, which I'm most excited about that we've done this year, is we've released our Spotinst module. So this is leveraging the Spot provider for Terraform. And I'm talking about Spot.io, which is a third-party service for intelligently managing preemptible services on AWS and Google Cloud and other services as well. It does a very different way of managing your node pools for Kubernetes. When you log into AWS and you look at your node pool, you can't find your node pool, kind of. There's no pool, there's just instances. They're discrete instances that are managed by them, by their controller on the back end. And what's beautiful about the Spotinst controller is you can deploy a pod that needs 128 gigs of RAM, and it deploys one instance that has 128 gigs of RAM. You can deploy another one that needs 2 gigs of RAM, and then if it can slot that into one of your existing nodes, it will do it. Otherwise, it'll launch a minimally right-sized instance specifically to host that. So with Spotinst, they have a controller. It's called Ocean. It deploys inside your cluster. It talks to the scheduler and the metrics server, and it knows exactly how much workload is scheduled and what kinds of resources it needs. And then it can pick the Spot instances on the back end to right fit that workload. And that's why I really like the Spotinst Ocean controller solution for EKS. So
we evaluated the Spotinst too, and there is one caveat I think that we had, was that it only works in AWS VPC mode. So if you're not really running Kubernetes and you want to use Spotinst, you have to be in AWS VPC mode for them to use it with trunking enabled. So that means that you cannot use shared VPCs.
That's yes, and so those are good caveats. I didn't know about specifically non-VPC and shared VPCs are not something we ever deploy.
Yeah, I don't recommend them.
Yeah, a lot of limitations with that. We ran into limitations with shared VPCs also on like using Kinesis with Elasticsearch. It wouldn't drain into an Elasticsearch in a shared VPC, for example. So yeah. What was I going to say? So you're using, so Spotinst has many ways to integrate with it. They have kind of like a turnkey, just give us AWS access and we'll try and optimize it. And then you have like the Terraform approach to it, where you're explicitly provisioning your resources using the Spot-Inst API, and that's what this module is doing. Pepe, you're not using this module, right? I opened up the wrong module.
No,
This is
no,
the,
and one of the things is that we were moving to Fargate. We have this huge project of moving everything to Fargate, and then we talked to Spot-Inst, and then Spot-Inst basically converts Fargate to ECS EC2 to use the Spot instances. So then we had to stop everything, and so hopefully this year we are going to move over to Spot-Inst and going back to ECS.
yeah. Cool. Any other questions on which type of EKS node pool to use? Why Spot-Inst is awesome, or otherwise?
I think I can talk about that. Last month, we deploy a test EKS with Fargate as a backend for the nodes. As you said, as you mentioned, the limitation actually between the current nodes and the Fargate nodes. But at the end, it gives you like a much cheaper option for EKS. It makes it more lower price for that. You only need to modify your YAML files so it can work on the Fargate profiles. So yeah, I think, but still not on the production side. So it's just a
Okay,
test.
hasn't made there, but yeah, and Amazon has definitely made a lot of improvements, and Spot instances are finally available for EKS. Is it Fargate now? Is that true? I think that was an announcement like towards the end of the last year,
I'm not
or was
sure.
it only ECS Fargate? EKS Fargate Spot instances, spot pricing.
I'm not sure. Spot. Okay. No.
Yeah, I have. We haven't tried doing it.
Mm,
Here's a feature request. Let's see, and it's still open. Yeah, so it's still not Spot for Fargate is still not supported for EKS. So, but I think it is supported for ECS. All right. Well, we are out of time for today. Sorry, we have not had a chance to really to get to any other questions during the call. But a recording of this will be posted to our YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed, head over to youtube.com/c/cloudposse for this recording and all other past recordings. If you ever want to book a session with Cloud Posse, you get to talk to me. Go over to cloudposse.com/quiz to get started with that, and look forward to hearing from you. Anyways, thank you all for joining. See you all same place, same time next week. Make sure to register for the next office hours by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, that's cloudposse.com/office hours. We also have our podcast, newsletter. You can follow us on LinkedIn to get a pulse on everything that we're doing around here. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.